The following episode contains or may contain spoilers. So if you're spoiler sensitive, maybe beware.
Yeah, you sensitive people.
Get out.
No, get in. Welcome to the Phantom Zone. 3 fans, 1 podcast, and a sea of gay comics.
Yes.
Spoiler alert.
A rainbow sea of queerdom. Is that not good? Let's start again. Okay. A sea. Okay. No.
I'm Kayla.
I'm Noah.
Jared.
Hey, I got first this time.
You did. It was really weird. I don't
It's
like
illegal.
it.
Yeah.
So today is our LGBT in comics history episode.
Yeah. We're going to do the history.
Prepare for knowledge.
Yes. So we
yeah.
thought it would be a really good idea to, instead of just talking about LGBTQ plus characters in comics, to talk about the history of that in comics and the struggles and the, the progress.
How it looks like over time.
Yes.
It's been turbulent.
Yes. I think we're starting, way back in like the 60s, 70s and leading all the way up to now.
Oh, I got some mentions of the 40s and 50s.
Oh, hey,
That's a lot.
Extra credit.
That's a little.
And this means a lot to the cast of this podcast, right? Because we've got a couple of gay people on the podcast. Noah and Kayla are totally gay for each other. That's very true. No. Noah is homosexual.
So you're outing me.
Yes.
So you just Jean Greyed me.
Correct.
Like she did
Now
to
you can
Iceman.
out me back.
Everybody knows you're gay.
No, I don't think they did. When did I say that I was gay?
I outed you like in episode 4.
Was I out of the room?
No.
So
Yes.
anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 2 gay hosts on here, and we have an ally on here as well. But yes, it's very important to us, and it's I know it's important to a lot of people that read comics. All in all, it should reflect the world we live in today and should progress that way.
And it's interesting too. After I don't know about you guys, but we all did kind of separate research. I was like, oh, this is pretty. I didn't know a lot of this. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was pretty fascinating. Things move super quick.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you read it that way.
Totally.
If you read like the wiki of
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it was so quick to read. That's how quick. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to jump right in, guys?
Okay.
Yeah, because we got a history lesson here.
Yeah, well, I got the early years.
Yes.
What a horrifying take. So starting in the 40s and 50s, comic books in general were kind of under attack by the puritanical society that America was and remained for the next couple decades. But basically the Comics Code Authority started attacking comic books. And I don't know if you remember I believe it was the episode that we talked about Batwoman, so the Batgirls. I mentioned the Seduction of the Innocent, which was a published response to how gay they thought Batman and Robin acted and the subtext there. Yeah. So they introduced Batwoman to be here's a love interest for Batman. He's totally straight, guys.
Yeah.
But that whole movement brought on by the Comics Code Authority kind of set back, I feel, the representation in comics for a long time. The code was enacted from 1954 to 1989. And basically, homosexuality was forbidden to be talked about or alluded to in comics. And people still tried to get away with the little things that they could. But basically, comic book stores, the Comic Code Authority didn't stop the publishers from being able to print those. But the comic book stores wouldn't hold the comics in the stores unless it had the Comic Code of Approval.
Oh, so they couldn't even put them in the stores even if they did make them.
Yeah, exactly. So Marvel, DC, the indie shops, they could still technically publish these comics and print them, but the comic book stores couldn't hold them and sell them.
So they'd be a black market for representation in
exactly.
comics.
And there totally was, which...
It's a lot like how movie rating systems work now, where you don't have to be rated, but basically no one's going to carry your movie.
Yeah, exactly.
So it really hurts the sales.
Exactly. So this comic code kind of put in kind of like you would said, a black market, or basically alternative comics and indie publishers and self-published comics versus the mainstream comics.
Heck yeah.
Comic publishers. So basically, Well, actually, I have something totally interesting to mention. European comics and Japanese manga at the time that this is happening. European comics, because they didn't have a lot of censorship laws and they were just generally more progressive, they also viewed comics as more... they were more accepting of comics as an adult entertainment medium, as opposed to like, this is targeted towards kids.
Interesting.
That in the 70s and 80s, that they were able to explore homosexuality and like LGBT themes more publicly.
The controversial United States.
Yeah, exactly. They were more inclusive from earlier dates, and they led to more inclusion with like trans characters.
I didn't know that.
We're so free, guys. We're so free.
No, I'm telling you, America just came off super puritanical.
That's interesting
while
too.
reading the comparison in the same decade between countries, because Japan manga is typically targeted to all audiences, but the yaoi and yuri manga that were coming out at the time that had like they fluffed up, like it was a very romantic medium, but it was targeted towards like young girls.
That's interesting,
and it was widely accepted.
Which it's funny too, because the United States, everybody sees the United States as the free country and like the First Amendment and everything like that. So it's interesting.
You mean the United States of America?
Yes.
Oh, okay. No. Okay. Sure. It's very free. Go ahead. So go ahead.
That's my point
Yes.
that I'm trying to make.
Yes.
That with this Comics Code, that they pretty much stopped that, which is weird that was even allowed to happen.
Like before that, there was kind of like subtext going on in comics, and then from the 54 to 89, even that was kind of forbidden. And again, people try to get away with as much as they could in mainstream comics.
There's the historical context too is McCarthyism and the fear of communism and the fear of like, there were people that believed that the communists were trying to make people gay.
Yeah, well, it was also like, save the children, because America at the time was still very much like, comics are for children. And that was the difference mainly between European comics and their take, plus the lack of censorship laws. But there was still some progressive things happening. It just wasn't in mainstream comics. So don't look to DC or Marvel for super awesome gay characters during the 70s and 80s, because...
Or after, yeah.
Yeah, or after, really. Okay, that wasn't my job to read after. But basically, alternative comics kind of allowed for... they tended to be more autobiographical in the 70s and 80s, so they were self-published, typically by members of the LGBT community that had the resources to be able to do that. They gained popularity in the 80s specifically, especially when the AIDS crisis was going on. People really turned to comic book characters that way.
I mean, it's a form of escape too. Like, I mean, it makes complete sense that would be happy. I would love to be around that time and like run like a black market of like these comic books,
like gay characters in comics. I mean,
just so awesome.
There were some downsides too.
Yeah, I was gonna say a lot of them. At least the first couple of takes for like trans characters were very much like caricatures. Even some of the gay characters coming out in like the 70s were very much like, yikes, that's not a very sensitive take.
Like a very stereotypical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the underground comics basically had the ability to be more, one, sexually explicit, but also two, just politically driven. Like you could talk about politics in the comics because they weren't, adhering to what DC and the big houses had to do. But they kind of explored gender, sexuality. From 68 to 75, like I said, there still wasn't a lot of great representation for characters. They came off as kind of caricatures. And also an interesting thing between like mainstream comics and alternative comics is because alternative comics was generally coming from the community. They tended to focus more on the LGBT culture in itself and how they interacted with each other and like coming to terms with sexuality.
It was like Fugu. For us, gay us.
Yeah. No, exactly. Mainstream comics, when they deigned to include characters in the LGBT community, tend to focus as they were just assimilated into heteronormative society. And even ones that were coming out parallel with that were talking about the AIDS crisis, they tend to focus on its effect in the straight community as opposed to the devastation taken place in the gay community.
Which is really funny because it's like the straight people are going to die from this thing that all these gay people are dying from. We don't care about that.
Yeah.
We care about us, so let all of them die, but as long as we're fine, we're fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, 40s, 50s, subtext, and then Comic Code Authority came in and was like, no gay ever, anywhere. And then...
Like, you don't get AIDS from reading gay characters in comic books. I'm just saying.
If you read the Comics Code, too, it didn't say no gay stuff. It was heavily implied.
Oh, yeah. It was like
Because
the
it was-
sanctity of marriage.
And no perversion and...
Yeah.
Things like that.
I mean, like, sexual acts in general, like, couldn't even be alluded to, basically.
It's just stupid.
But so it was a good way to sort of not say something like, kill the queers, but then say a bunch of things that everybody kind of knew would be interpreted as like anti-gay, anti-queer stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's basically, it was a messy history, but a lot of progress was done, not in the big publishing houses, but kind of the underground people. Yeah. And part of the LGBT community, like just propelling that forward and being self-published and trying to spread comics that were inclusive.
I mean, fuck yeah. Good for them. I mean, like, also doing that.
Get it, girl.
It's great.
Anytime I try to, like, express my gayness, it turns out, like, it's, like, 25 years behind. I'm like, you go, girl. Ah, damn it.
You are older than us.
I am older and clumsier. And I'm like the T800 of gayness to your T1000.
Before we started recording, you were literally like, my back hurts.
Ow. My back hurts. But, you know, so we divided it into sections. We would deal with different sections. And we didn't know this before we went in because I was going to do the 90s to the aughts, like kind of deal with that.
It's because you grew up.
Okay, so that was the
You
first.
remember it.
Yeah, it's like you have vivid memories. You were in your mid-40s when that happened, probably.
Like, we grew up in the 90s too, but
Yes.
like
We were tiny.
What we remember
Yeah.
isn't necessarily what you would remember.
Yeah, because I remember it as an adult. That's the difference. You guys remember like the various forms of bubblegum and such.
You know, Aladdin.
I had light up sneakers.
But they're outside of my old teeth and long in the teeth. They're old and long. Anyway, here's the thing. Outside of that, it happened to correspond quite nicely because in '89, as Kayla mentions, the Comics Code comes down. Mm-hmm. It's changed and then it collapses pretty much right after that in the mid '90s. And so basically, queer history kind of takes off. In the 90s in a way, like I would suggest this period of time is pretty crucial, right? Because a few things happened, and I kind of discovered this afterwards. A bunch of characters were written as gay, but not publicly stated to be gay.
They tried to get away with as much subtext as possible.
Yeah. So it was like inferred.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so and it asked an interesting question about what it means for a character to be out. So characters like Maggie Sawyer and North Star, written by John Byrne, they were both written originally as gay characters, but the writers couldn't say they were characters. So even though these characters come along in the late 80s, they don't get to be publicly outed until the 90s, until the Comics Code come down. Mm. But what's funny is if you go back and read their pre-90s stuff, it's not like, oh, they could have been gay. It was like, they must, I don't have sex with women, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so I want to say that this period of time too also has sort of two major gay integration projects in a way. One is anti-persecution, which I'm going to argue that they're good at. The comics, as soon as they, the 90s hit, comics get really good at pushing an agenda of let's not persecute gay people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But also the second one is normalization.
Yeah.
And that they have a way harder time with, and we can talk about like kind of why that kind of stuff happens or whatever. So the first thing that happens after the Comics Code is all these characters that had been heavily insinuated to be gay and written as gay
can finally say it.
Just like, oh, also it's happy 1993, I'm gay. So some cool stuff happens, like Maggie Sawyer comes out of the closet, North Star comes out of the closet. But you know who beats North Star openly? I think you'll like this. Mm-hmm. Pied Piper, which is a Flash villain who kind of became like friends with Flash.
Yeah.
So one of the first moments for somebody to be like straight up like, I am gay, because he says like, I can't remember the thing. I had to look up these panels. The Flash is like, are any of the villains gay? I don't know why he was asking.
Yeah.
What?
And Pied Piper is like, I mean, none of them except for me. And then Flash is like, okay, I gotta go. And he leaves and then apologizes later because he was kind of a dick about it or whatever.
Mm. Yeah, it was...
That's your fave.
Yeah, I mean, he apologized.
He did.
So, I mean, that's great. It's a very funny kind of coming out thing, because you could tell that they were like, we should probably make a character gay. who could be gay, but that's not that mainstream?
Yeah.
Oh, Pied Piper. Why not? Because he
Interesting take.
sings and plays music. Like, great. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing too about that is that like that's pretty accurate for the way people in the 90s who were well-meaning did respond to gay people. Like they weren't like, you're awful, but it's like, hey, I don't know how to deal with this. I gotta go or whatever.
Yeah.
And you also bring up another interesting point, which is really true to this decade, which is like they have a tendency to make characters gay who are unfortunately kind of expendable in a way. So I think that from an editorial standpoint, the logic there was kind of like, okay, if there's huge fan reaction to this, huge backlash, nobody's gonna miss Pied Piper. It's unfortunate, but that is kind of the way things work.
It's definitely. I mean, it's like them testing it out.
I was
like,
gonna say, so they put their toe in the water, but didn't cannonball in.
Yeah, yeah. Which, like, a part of me is like, I'm glad you had representation and you did do something. But also, it's like, I see what you're doing.
Yeah. But it's kind of cool feather in his cap to say Pied Piper came out before North Star and stuff like that.
Yeah, but where is he now?
Exactly. Well, really, I mean, I want him to come back now after going back and reading this because I'm like, oh, I also like this character a lot.
Yeah, he's been in and out, but he's definitely known like he's North Star like in comics.
Yeah. Second string villain.
And I kind of have to mention this too because you touched on this idea of like stereotypes and things like that. So technically, North Star is not the first openly gay superhero. It was Extraño.
I love him.
He's this character. I mean, he's like I said, he's like technically the first openly gay character. But like you mentioned, I think these well-meaning straight people that were writing characters, they can't really talk about the character being gay that much. They can't just say it. So the only way to really communicate it is through these stereotypes. And you can argue that in some sense, especially if they were presented now, they would sort of hold us back. But at the time, I think a lot of these people were trying to like, hey, this is a gay person.
He's definitely very flamboyant.
Yeah.
And his name also translates to strange/queer.
Well, let's not forget, if you look at this guy, I don't know how this got missed. He is a joke about Doctor Strange.
Yes.
So look him up, but this is sort of the description I read in one of the articles. 1988 also introduced the DC Comics hero Extraño, a cast member of the short-lived New Guardian series. He was technically the first openly gay superhero because North Star wasn't open, even though it was clear that his sister and other people knew. As an effeminate and flamboyant Peruvian sorcerer who referred to himself as Auntie, Extraño was criticized by many as a gay stereotype. He was later diagnosed as having HIV and later still met death at the hands of the villain Corona.
Whoa.
And as Noah mentioned, he comes back in later.
He comes back at Midnighter, the Steve Orlando run.
Yeah.
He's great in that one.
Yes.
Like, he's not that.
Yeah.
But as damaging in some sense as I think these stereotypes were, I would also argue they were kind of a necessary step in bringing openly gay
So it's like
people.
a very sloppy way of introducing.
Very, very much so.
It's like, it's funny because maybe the writer had good intentions of like putting a gay superhero out there, bringing awareness to like HIV and AIDS, but it's also like, you do know straight people can get HIV and AIDS too.
Yeah.
So you don't need to have the first openly gay superhero die of HIV and AIDS. That's just something, food for thought.
No, it's true. I mean, that's absolutely true. And then the other problem with him, and this is a similar problem with the time period, is that even if he's not treated like crap, he is a joke.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And there's a negative to positive transition where, like, if remember Jack from Will and Grace, I would argue he's in this kind of liminal place there where it's positive and we like him and he's not a bad character, but a lot of his comedy comes from like, look at this silly gay guy or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, past that, so that's the early 90s. As we get into the late 90s, it's like a desert of like, there just isn't much going on. I think in a certain way, this was like a hot button issue in the early 90s. And then as those big moments happen, it kind of cools down until one of what I take to be one of the greatest moments in ever, which is Ellis in the late 90s, early 2000s introduces
Warren Ellis.
Yeah, Warren Ellis. Sorry, thank you. Yeah.
You're on last name basis
Ellis,
with this
Ellis.
writer.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
At least you didn't say Warren.
It's out of respect. Introduces the Authority. And in now they had showed up in the store in Stormwatch and been kind of like just a basic analog, but he makes Apollo and Midnighter Superman and Batman, but they're in a relationship.
Yeah, I mean, to me personally, they're like the best representation of two gay men in a relationship in comics.
It may not get better than that either in this respect, which is that like you find out they're gay. Also, they don't really say it much early on, but there's like a kiss on the cheek and they're treated like a couple. And
they act normal. Like Absolutely. They don't scream like these characters are gay. Yeah. They're just fucking acting normal.
Living their superhero lives.
Yes.
Yeah. And together. And they kick ass. Yeah. There's not a single thing about them that separates them from being like functionally badass supers and stuff like that. So that now as we get into the 2000s, it starts the snowball starts to roll, and there's a lot of cool gay stuff that happens. I do want to say one negative thing was that the handling of trans characters in this period of time, and obviously earlier, isn't good. But specifically, it's what's bothersome is anytime it's represented in comics in this period, it's due to some magical thing or a science fiction thing.
Yeah.
So no one has a normal sexual or gender identity that manifests itself as transgender or transsexuality. It's always like two personalities because of Merlin's magic locked into, or a person who there's a spell and they change it. So like
there's still some fictitious about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's Ultra Humanite, Shining Knight, Starhawk. There are all these characters that have that kind of thing. That's kind of baby steps to some degree.
Well, I feel like especially in the early 2000s, and I mean, we all remember the whole trans bathroom debacle that was happening. Still happening. I mean, so it's one thing to go from like having, gay characters, lesbian characters in comics. That's a huge step. And then to add trans characters into there, that's a whole nother, like, this is just redoing all of what already progressed all over again, because for some reason they see them, I mean, they technically are, but they're a whole nother group of people. So it's like, now we have to like figure out, how do we introduce these characters? It's like, oh, well, we have characters that can turn into a werewolf, so that could be some weird metaphor for a trans person. It's like, no, you could just make a trans person.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think in some sense it's because that like with things like gender identity and sex, people have more have ideas that are very hard for them to kind of shift on in ways that it was a little bit easier for them to just, okay, well, you could be attracted to a different kind of person. I could see that.
Well, there's the whole, I'm not sure if you saw this in your research or whatever, with Mystique and Destiny.
Yeah.
So a very long time, it was like inferred that they were in a relationship. Mystique is a woman or whatever, and Mystique is also Nightcrawler's, mother. But for some reason, there was this weird inferred thing that Mystique turned into a man and impregnated Destiny, and that's Nightcrawler's parentage. And I'm like,
but that story never got made.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, that would have been a wrong way to do any type of, I think, queer relationship. For me personally, because I just think that's weird. It's like you're just kind of giving a reason or just making up some weird kind of flimsy reason to have a gay relationship. It's like, oh no, she was a man when they slept together, so technically.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's actually this weird historical sort of thing. I'm glad you brought this up because I wasn't going to get into it, but I think it's worth mentioning.
I think it's fascinating.
Well, so it's this originally lesbian relationship.
Yep.
It's written that way by John Byrne. It's intended that way, and this is another case like where it's like with North Star and Maggie Sawyer, where they're written to be that way, but they can't fully say it explicitly, and so that's great. But then there's this idea, what if Mystique is also transgender?
Yeah.
And the question is, if by making her transgender and transsexual in this case, because she actually could become a man and impregnate a woman with her mutant powers or whatever, does that go against the validity and of the lesbian relationship? Are you walking that away? Or is it this progressive moment of trans visibility really early? And it's really hard to kind of figure out.
I just think that whole situation's kind of like convoluted and like too messy.
Yes.
To be like, we're championing, queer rights or whatever. It's like, yeah, but that's really confusing because like, is it a lesbian relationship? Is it a trans relationship? Or is it just a completely new type of shapeshifter relationship? Like,
and some of this muddiness, I think, is evidence of they're still really trying to work out the kinks of gay representation in comics in this period. 2002, Midnight Republic get married. It is the first mainstream, because this is a mainstream comic. I mean, I think it's not Marvel or DC, but this is one of the top selling comics in the comic store at the time, and they're
later
10
owned
years
by DC. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then in 10 years before Marvel has their big wedding and stuff like that, which isn't to be sneezed at, but I'm just saying, like, they got there a bit late in the game. So just a few more things to mention. In 2003, there's what I like to call the Rawhide debacle, the Rawhide Kid debacle. So they released this sort of thing. And again, they're allowed to say that he's gay, but they really don't want to say it. They released a comic book of this cowboy character in 2003, which they have to put in their explicit comics line. There's no explicit sex. He doesn't even say he's gay.
There's not even boobies.
Nothing like it. There's no violence, which is usually, it's just that he's a very obviously flamboyant character.
Yep.
And he communicates his gayness almost sheerly in innuendo and like, well, you're sassy today. It's just me, Captain Sassy Pants it up. And that's how he be's gay. And again,
He be's gay.
And I want to give it, again, not an excuse, but I want to say, again, this is well-meaning straight people trying to figure out how to integrate gay characters, because you got to remember, sexuality and romance is almost completely off the table.
I feel like it was well-intentioned writers and creative teams, but bad-intentioned companies that let it publish. Because, I mean, who's the one that decided to put that explicit label on there? You know what I mean? Like,
it's not the writer.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I guarantee you the writer that wanted to write a gay character would be like, you want me to, there's no sex in this. Like, what? We don't even cuss.
But I want to say also, what's awesome is 2003's Rawhide Yada Yada, the Rawhide Kid, I think is the last negative example in this way. It's this big explicit snafu. And then after this, they start kind of getting it right. You can quibble with the details, but in 2005, The Young Avengers comes out. And there's some, we're not sure if we're going to show it or whatever, but people very quickly are like, oh, they're a gay couple. And this is really well written, and we're doing it.
Way too long
to
find that out. But
no, for them to say it officially, but like, it was just so like.
There's this weird thing. I know this is going in general discussion-y type thing, but like, I do think it's funny that the audience knows that these characters are gay, and there's a lot of innuendos and a lot of like, you're holding that person's hand. Yeah. Like, you don't have to say you're gay, but like, you guys are gay, right? But then they'll like make situations to make you think differently or whatever. And it's like, okay. And then 7 years later, it's like, they're gay. It's like, why? We
knew that already.
Yeah.
So,
and I think
it's baby steps, but like, it's just funny that it's like the audience knows already, guys. Like, this isn't secret.
And sometimes the announcement is itself the weird part. Because even at the beginning of this thing, I'm like, I'm gay. Which I feel like I need to say in case I make some silly joke and people take it the wrong way, that it's coming from a place of like, that's my identity. But, you know, feels awkward to be like, I'm this, you know what I mean? So I almost see some of the, like, they don't want to make these explicit pronouncements because that's not what it's like to really live as a gay person, except for a few moments when you have to kind of do it or whatever.
I always do feel it's not fun, but funny in the workplace. Yeah. Like at a new job. Yeah. Because like...
I got a secret.
Well, no. I mean, people just assume that like I have a girlfriend or like I'm dating somebody, and like I'll never like most of the time when they're like, "Oh, are you dating somebody?" I'm like, "Yes." That's it. And then like a few months later, they find out it's like a man or whatever, and they're like, "Wait, so you're gay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't. Did I need to? Are you straight?" Like I just think it's so funny. It's like you always have to come out, but there's no like right way or like really non-awkward way to do it aside from being like, guys, I'm gay, I'm a new employee, no more awkward situation now.
And they're like, oh yeah, you don't work in this office, that's down the hall. Look, well, it was nice meeting everybody then. But just to round this last stuff off, so like I said, so Young Avengers happens, Ultimate Colossus and the Ultimate X-Men. But I think
Ultimate Colossus.
Like that's his final form is gay.
It's gay. I'd be perfectly fine with that.
And we kind of argued before, and I think it's fair to say that it felt kind of cheap in a way that they were willing to make Colossus gay in this time period. But it was the the alternate universe.
The ultimate universe.
And then they killed everybody.
So they just killed. Oh, they're like, hey, we can make anybody anything in here because it's all going to fucking die anyway.
To be fair, I don't know if that's why they killed everybody. That is like, what? He's gay, kill them all. No. Get him.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say it like
that. I know. But I'd say they've had a little more freedom over there, and they actually handle it pretty well. Mm-hmm. And then two other things that didn't get a huge amount of press, but I actually kind of thought were good moments. 2007, Daken comes out, which is Wolverine's son, and he's represented or revealed to be bisexual, and they really sort of integrate it nicely into the story where it's important in a few moments, but it doesn't overtake his character, and you can just feel the audience is kind of like, okay, yeah, this is part of it, and it doesn't.
Having a bisexual man in comics is a big deal too. Yeah, I feel like they're more liberally applying that to women anyway. So
yes,
that's a big
that's
step
very true.
In general.
Absolutely, that's a good point because most of the time you see women. Or like when people talk about bisexuality, they are referring to a woman or a woman character or whatever.
That's true. That's absolutely true. And that which leads me to this, which is Wonder Woman. So in 2008, it's heavily suggested that there's been some.
We all knew.
Yeah. So that's interesting because I think before the way that you would talk about a person who was gay without saying it was like, they're single, they're a bachelor. Or whatever. Like, they just don't. As a matter
they
of fact,
come from an island of nothing but women.
No, exactly. And so, for if you are a Puritan-y person, you can just have this mythological view where it's like women doing nothing but eating fruit and exercising, and there'd be no sexuality at all because there's no men. How would there be sexuality?
To be fair, I mean, it is like we shouldn't assume that they're gay just because they're on an island of women. They can take care of themselves or whatever. But it is funny that it's like. They had to say it, and they made it that way because it's like, I mean, we could have guessed there was some like gay or bisexual women there.
It shouldn't come as a huge shock.
Yeah,
but I did like that in the movie that it was inferred that she is bisexual.
Yes,
because she was like, men are just used to procreate, but they're not used for pleasure. It's like, ooh.
And in 2008, I don't know. When did the movie come out? A little bit later? 12?
I think it was 12, yeah.
So this was kind of the idea was that...
No, after.
Way after.
That's Avengers.
Yeah. But the idea is that she goes to make a kind of, what do you call it, like, suggest a bonding or sexual courtship kind of ritual, which suggests, if they have this in Themyscira... That means they've been doing it with each other.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a cool thing. And I was funny too because we were talking about like how they discover we assume people are gay by these innuendos. Element Lad, do you guys remember this character?
No.
That sounds like a fake character.
No, well his last name is or his last tag or the last word in his name is Lad. So what do you think he's part of? The Legion of Superheroes, right?
Oh,
yeah, exactly. Because they're all lass and lad. Well, he just over a period of time suggested like not dating women or being okay with not going on a date or missing out on a date, or he was kind of. Well, the thing is though, like it's like the Abraham Lincoln of the gay community of comics, where they're like people piecing together. So the gay community kind of adopted him as their own based on all these like they did this like connect the dots and like I think that's gay. Yeah. But yeah, so that's
he's like no, I just was bored with dating people.
I'm asexual.
Yeah, there you go.
So basically, that's the '90s and the early aughts, which I take to be this kind of like crucial.
Early what?
Aughts. The aughts, the 2000s, the aughts. Never heard of that?
No.
Yeah.
Do you old people call it that?
That's what we call it. We call it, I'm a millennial. Fuck you. Anyway.
The generational divide is just really...
We're all millennials here.
Yeah, I know, but I'm like one of the older millennials. That was my point. We're the same generation. Anyway.
So like literally opposite ends.
That's true. So point being is that like that I take that to be like the movement, the portal into the current era.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So current era Noah.
Yay! I don't really. So I have some good moments. There's not really like big historical moments like Kayla or like Jared had where it was like the firsts. But I mean, North Star does fall into my category, which it's great that it happened. It was one of the most publicized marriages in comics. It was great that they did that, but they marketed it as the first. It's not. It's not the first. It might have been the first for Marvel to do it, but for them to be like the first openly gay marriage in comics, like no, it's not.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's great it happened, but also stop making such a huge deal about this. It's already happened.
Yeah.
You're way late to the game, guys.
You can stop patting yourself on the back.
Yeah. But one of the standout people, America Chavez. So,
Yay.
AKA Miss America. She, in 2011, she was in the miniseries Vengeance. And then later she went into the Young Avengers, which she's a current staple character to that. She's, bisexual and also Latin American. So it's great. All representation all the time there. She actually has her own solo series. I think it's still currently happening, right? Or did it end?
I don't know if it's been canceled, but it's pretty beloved.
Because I know it started in 2017, so I don't know if they restarted it. I have not. I haven't finished that one. I need to finish
Even
it.
if it's over now, it's still got to be understood as a success because it was well over 12 issues.
Yes.
Anytime something is just over 12 issues.
Yeah, you're like,
That's a
so
success.
this is pretty popular.
Yeah, because that means there is at least like one or two trades out there. So it's like that's a story. Character successful.
Yeah.
It's like 3 seasons of a show.
Oh, you made it to 3 seasons.
You get 3, you're good.
Yeah. Also, I mean, just to like comment on her outfit and stuff, I've seen people cosplay as her.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Like I'm just saying, like all around this character.
You're like, I love her.
So great representation all the way around. And then we get to there's this thing that started happening currently where they did a J.K. Rowling thing where they retroactively were like, that character's being gay.
I'm glad you
they
mentioned
are
this.
gay now. Of course I'd mention it.
Yeah.
So Alan Scott, Green Lantern, is gay now. He's from Earth 2. Like, what does that matter? He's not like
Earth 2 Electric Boogaloo is the full title.
I mean, it's great though. I'm happy that another character is gay. I want all the representation all the time, but also why? Like, there's literally millions of Green Lanterns. You could have just made the Ring choose a homosexual person or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like because to me, for something like this to happen, it gives people that don't like this something to talk about or something not to like.
Oh, like it was just shoehorned in.
Exactly. Or like, they're trying to make all our characters gay or whatever. It's like, they're not, even though they just did, they're not though.
Yeah,
like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't really like the Alan Scott one. And also Iceman. This happened to Iceman as well. So he's dated women before
His entire
career.
Yeah.
And so what happened in X-Men was timelines. All this time travel stuff had happened. There's a younger Iceman and an older Iceman. So when the younger Iceman realized he was gay after Jean Grey read his mind. So that's how you come out in X-Men, apparently, I guess. I don't know what could have possibly been happening in his mind to where she was the one that had to be like, you're gay. Like, you know what's happening, right? It's like, why? How did he not know that? How would he possibly not?
It is a bit weird.
And then he had to tell his older self, like, hey, stop being in the closet. You're gay too. It's because I'm you.
Yeah.
He outed himself to himself, then to everybody else.
After Jean Grey.
Yeah, it was after Jean Grey outed him.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, it really is context dependent. Remember, they did the same thing to Shatterstar.
Yep.
But he had a more mysterious asexuality based on his origin and things like that.
Because he's an alien.
Yeah. When they wrote him as gay, Rob Liefeld, who created him, had a really regressive kind of... He said something to the effect of like, well, I wrote him and he's a warrior, but he's not a gay warrior. Yikes. It's like, yeah, I don't think you get to decide that anymore. Plus, rather than worry about these gender issues and sexuality issues, you should learn to draw fucking feet. How about that? Since you're an artist, be good at that first. And then, yeah. Well, it just really, it bothered me, but I think you bring up a really interesting point, which is that like, when is it okay to do this anachronistic kind of they were gay the whole time, and when does that like go so far where it's like, I can't believe that, you know what I mean? Especially with Iceman, which I was a little hesitant when this all came out and this was all happening, especially the way it happened. It was like very old fashioned, like coming out type stuff, and I was like, okay, we're past that now. Like, this is weird that you made a younger Iceman not know he was gay or still in the closet, and then had somebody else out him. It's like, if you were gonna do this, just have him come out when he's younger. Like, he's in a different timeline anyways. Yeah. And you could see that there's more gay people around. He's like, oh, I can be gay now. Whatever. I don't know. Yeah.
But I do think it's weird. I don't know the answer to should they do this or should they not? Because I've always loved Iceman, and the fact that he's gay now and had his own solo series as a gay man, it's like, I like that. That's representation I want. I identify with that, but also there's this weird part of me that's like, I don't like that they did that in a way, because it's like they just felt the need to make somebody gay.
Well, I feel like, obviously, I can't speak for the whole community, but I feel like even within the LGBT community, there are different opinions on how things should be done.
Yeah.
And what's good, what's bad, representation, and all of that. Like, even within the community. So I feel like the solution to this, you have to acknowledge, one, as a writer in general, you're not going to please all the people all the time, but two, then just have a variety of these identities in comics. Don't let there be one bisexual man be the representation for all bisexual men, because then there's going to be people within the community that are like, that's awesome. And then people in the community that's like, no. But then if you have more bisexual men, more bisexual women, lesbians, I mean, I feel like the answer to this would just be to include more diversity, more stories that just are different.
Completely agree.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I mean, the more that it happens and the more representation it is, the more normalized it is. That's a weird word to say, but I mean, the more it's just becoming accepting, because now you're not hearing about it as much.
Yeah.
Now there's just gay characters and they're just around and you don't hear about it as much. So, I mean, I think that's great. I mean, nowadays we have so many openly LGBT characters than we did from when Kayla started talking until now. I mean, like in terms of DC, just to name a few, it's like Batwoman, Aqualad, Harley and Ivy, Midnighter and Apollo, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
In Marvel, America Chavez, Iceman, Wiccan and Hulkling, North Star. I mean, there's just that list alone is way more than like the one. That was even like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Richter,
and people
too.
would argue that
And
in that
Richter,
list, there's good representation as opposed to the first attempts.
Yeah. I mean, and there's also, I like how the supporting characters that are coming about. And I have one, because I like to say his name. So Squirrel Girl has her friend Koi Boy. That's also part of the LGBT.
Oh my God.
It's part of the LGBT community. And I like that they're introducing like even just supporting characters. And they're LGBT. You can do that.
Yeah.
Because like they don't need to be front and center. Like
Yeah.
as long as there's representation, I think it's great. But indie comics always are the holy grail to contemporary LGBT comic representation.
They ain't afraid.
Yeah. I mean, they're not. So, I mean, there was a comic, The Woods, under the Boom publisher line that won a GLAAD award. So, I mean, and that's no big publisher, DC or Marvel or anything, has even gotten that award for something like that. So I think that's great. I mean, that just shows that these indie publishers are just really not scared to really do this representation and to talk about stories that mean something to people. You also have like Petrichor from Saga, which is a great representation of trans people in comics. Because there's a scene, I'm not sure if anybody's read it, or I don't think Kayla's gotten to this point, but there's a scene where Hazel walks into the shower and Petrichor's in the women's shower. She turns around, she has all her parts and everything, and she's like, wait, you're not a woman? And Petrichor's like, yes, I am.
Yeah.
And just like even something like that, where she's like, no, I am. And Hazel's like, oh, okay. And she like walks off. I'm like, that's it. That's how you do it. Like, it's great. And then even in Supergirl, how there's a character Dreamer. I'm not a big fan of the CW, but they do have their good moments. And they made the first transgender superhero played by a transgender actress.
That's awesome.
Her name's Dreamer. She has precognition and astral projection. Super cool, super useful, great character. Like, I mean, representation's really not that hard to come by nowadays, which I'm happy about.
It's heading in the right direction.
I think it's great. And I think that what hasn't happened with the trans stuff, which I think is probably positive, in my opinion at least, is that they are introducing new characters that are trans characters. They're not doing this thing, which I didn't really say it yet, but I really don't like the Iceman thing. I don't like
when they're like, oh, this character that's been in continuity is now retroactively.
Why do I have to grapple with all this stuff about they weren't gay for so long, but now they are, and these convoluted time travel sort of notions, when it's like, just create new gay characters, or there are plenty of characters whose sexuality has never been discussed.
That is a good point.
So have them be gay, and then put real talent on those stories.
Yeah.
And then that's how you grow the thing, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a little... The whole Iceman thing's weird for me.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, he's always been one of my favorite Icemen. He's been one of my favorite Icemen.
Of all the Icemen. Yeah.
He's been one of my favorite X-Men for a long time. And I'm still conflicted to this day. His solo run's really good. It does have that old-fashioned like kind of bigotry in it and stuff, which he's going to have to deal with if he's coming out as gay. But it's kind of one of those things of like, I think as time goes on, it's not going to be an issue for people and people are just going to know him as gay. I hope.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. So, I mean, I like the representation and I like that character and I think it adds something new and to that character that wasn't there before.
Well, it definitely adds something new. That's men. That would be what it adds. Yeah.
Shut up. Yeah, and I think I don't think a lot of people think about it, but Deadpool, the movies have been actually really good representation.
Yeah.
Because I believe, the first superhero movie with an openly gay character, which is Negasonic Teenage Warhead. What do you mean,
I thought you were going to say Deadpool.
No.
Because Deadpool is too.
Yeah, he's bisexual.
Yeah, so that's what I thought. But
And
no,
he
you're
loves
absolutely
him
right.
some Colossus, which it might be Ultimate Colossus.
Are you
who
ready
knows?
for them to ship
What?
Deadpool and Colossus? Are we ready for that? Wouldn't that be amazing?
They've already
It
been
already
hinted at in
happened.
the movies.
I want a full shipping. I don't want to
I'm
kind
pretty
of
sure
like...
he gropes him every single movie.
Yeah.
That's very true.
I think it would be fantastic.
But yeah,
to have a couple.
Yukio and Negasonic Teenage Warhead.
That's true.
First openly, and I'm pretty sure this is going to get over. So, because Marvel's making, yet again, a huge deal about casting the first led openly gay superhero or whatever. And it's like, well, Deadpool already did it. Even though it's not the first led one, they already did it. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I feel like Marvel's going to try to like grab that whole like North Star thing again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On that note, I actually usually don't get overly invested in the quota problem.
Mm.
You know what I mean? But I have to admit, the Marvel Cinematic Universe not having any queer characters, there's a
For what,
lot.
their 21 movie.
It's a lot of characters.
Valkyrie's apparently bisexual.
Yeah. I mean, but this is kind of, in itself a bit annoying when they're sort of like, oh, hey, in the back of their baseball card in the did you know section, did you know one time they kissed a girl in college? Like, no, they don't have to make the whole thing about it, but I don't want it to be the kind of thing where it's like almost a secret within the character origin or something.
I mean,
like that.
I agree with that. These movies started in like 2008, right?
With Iron Man
around
2008.
Well past the Comics Code Authority.
Yeah,
I mean, there's no reason why they should be scared or didn't do it. And to have a Russo brother be the first openly gay character.
Oh my god.
Let me not be mad for a second and just cool down because like okay, that's fine.
Sorry.
That character can be in
You
there.
lit the match.
That character can be in there and everything like that. There's nothing wrong with it. But then when they were like, oh, it was the first openly gay, I don't care if this dumpy old dude went on a date. That's not what we want a gay superhero.
Yeah.
Come
So
on.
the problem I had with that representation was it's a gay man struggling in a relationship with a man.
Yeah.
That's like the only representation that you really see in the movies and TVs when they're like scared to make like a front and center gay person.
Mm-hmm.
They're always struggling with some type of relationship or like not being able to find anybody or like they're in an abusive relationship. It's like, how about they just be fucking normal? Like they can't pay their rent or something.
I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't even have a problem
There
with
is a movie called Rent about gay people.
Yeah, that's right. But I didn't even have a problem with the particular representation. It's just like what we want is a gay superhero. Like it's like if in the Captain America: Civil War, when she blew up the building on accident, and they'd be like, "Oh, that was a gay community center." Like that's not what we're looking for.
Exactly.
We need specific,
I mean,
representation.
hey, they're heading in the right direction.
Well, they boasted it up so much, though, that it was like, really? This is what you were proud of?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly.
Well, when I just saw the headline and they were like, talks about the first openly gay character in Endgame. And I was like, what? Who?
Now, are you
Who's
introducing a new hero?
And then when I saw it was a Russo brother, I was like, are you really?
They go to Quicksilver's grave and they're like, "Oh yeah, he's gay. We forgot to tell you. Yeah, he was gay." Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, here's to hoping that they go in the right direction. I mean, Marvel's gonna be introducing the first super gay-led superhero movie. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah.
Soon. So
You
that's
got there
cool.
eventually.
Oh, with the Eternals, right? That's
Yes,
the
the
rumor,
Eternals,
right?
yeah.
Okay. And if they confirm that, I'm just curious. Do we like?
That's confirmed.
They've said that. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
They're casting that person. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, is there any unaccounted for group that you feel like needs more representation?
All of them.
Well, no, I don't disagree. I really don't. But
I mean, I do feel
I feel like asexuality and transgendered people could use a lot more rep in comics in general.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that.
Intersex.
Yeah.
Another group that has
aromantic. Just like there's more than 2 letters.
Oh, it's aromantic.
Yeah.
I thought it was aromatic. Like just gay people that smell. Just to kind of... Okay. Yeah.
Well, gay people do smell
They do.
just like regular people.
Yeah.
God, Jared. No, I mean, I think, I still feel like all of them still have a huge way to go. But, I mean, I do like how it's not being as much of a taboo subject now. I mean, it's great. So, I don't know.
What I want is them to introduce a gay character, and that character be not just some sidelined character, but like one of the main characters in the universe.
Yeah, where's North Star now?
Exactly. Yeah.
Is he on his honeymoon still?
Yeah. I'm sure we may one day get to talk about him at greater length. I love that character, and I agree. I'm actually pretty sad that he's one of Marvel's few speedsters.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, he doesn't really get.
They do like speedsters.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
The thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with Midnight and Apollo. Like, they were in DC in their line.
Yeah.
And Steve Orlando did it. Dick Grayson was in his comic. I mean, all these are the characters. And then once his line ended, they just like went right back to where they were, and they're forgotten. Time for the gay old comic book recommendation time. So I'll recommend America Chavez. So America, Volume 1 by Gabby Rivera. Yes. She's actually a queer writer herself. So she's queer. She wrote a queer character. Very great. But it's called America, Volume 1, The Life and Times of America Chavez. It came out in 2017. So it's at your comic shop. Super recent. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my recommendation.
Nice. I'll do Harley Quinn number 25. Yay. It came out 2 years ago, so 2017 abouts. But it's basically Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy's first main continuity comic book kiss on page.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, and I love their relationship. Yeah, it's really good. It's really good.
Smooching.
Yeah, I like them a lot too.
Yeah.
It needed to
and they're very sweet and supportive of each other, and I'll probably talk about it at a later date, but...
Wink, wink.
I am going to recommend Fantastic Four number 1 because the thing was gay the whole time. And nobody knows it but me. No, that's not true. Okay, my real recommendation.
I don't even know where you would find Fantastic Four number 1.
That's true. Do you have $3 million? Well, okay. This is more affordable.
Wouldn't it be $4 million?
No, I don't think that's how prices work. Is that they just is there a number in the thing? Well, that's that much. Anyway, I'm gonna go with Green Lantern Volume 3, Brother's Keeper. To not be confused because there's so many volumes in DC because of rebirths and everything like that. Yep. It's the one written by Judd Winnick and illustrated by Dale Eaglesham, the guy that's doing Shazam right now. It's so good. This is back in the early aughts, like 2002-ish or something like that. Again, that's the thing that people actually say. Anyway. Believe it or not.
Only old-timey people.
Well, that's true. Language isn't real if 17-year-olds don't say it. But here's the thing. But anyway, so it's a really good comic book for a number of reasons. Terry Berg this is back in the Kyle Rayner days. Terry's Kyle's sort of assistant / sidekick and friend, and he comes out as gay. And there's two things that are really amazing about this. One is that unlike in the comics that we've been talking about where somebody's like, I'm gay, and then it's like a splash page of them like punching somebody, in this they actually have like a 4-page awkward coming out. It's one of the most realistic coming out scenes I've ever seen, where he kind of can't say it, and he kind of, that kind of thing. And then there's also Terry gets gay bashed, and Kyle has to go, let's say, dispatch the gay bashers. So not only is it a really realistic depiction of somebody coming out, but also it mentions violence and hate against gay people and attacks it head on, and I think it's great. So check that out.
Nice.
Thanks, guys. God, come on.
Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at The Phantom Zone Pod for more podcast updates.